I am so delighted and excited to be here with you today, and I pray this will be a blessing for you. We're going to talk about Hebrew prophets, but I am not here to tell you what to believe about prophecy. What I want to do is help you learn how to read these texts for yourself. It's not, it's frozen for some reason. See if I can get it working. There we go. We live in a society of e-readers. I don't know how many of you can remember what a newspaper is. A newspaper has many sections. There's the front page news, and then you have editorials. You have a section on sports, on travel, on theater, on stocks and bonds, obituaries, comics. There are many different sections. And so the question that I ask you is there truth on the front page and no truth in the comics? Well, there might be more truth in the comics than there is on the front page. But it's a different kind of literature. And when you turn the page, you don't say to yourself, do you remember the rules for reading this literature? You automatically change gears, and we know it's a different form of communication. And I think that's what we have to remember when we're reading the Bible. There are many, and especially when we're reading the prophets. The prophets use an extremely wide variety of speech types to communicate. They communicate by different kinds of disputation, Isaiah 49, and judgment speeches, Isaiah 13. By promises of restoration and salvation, Isaiah 4, 11, 40. By allegories, Ezekiel 16. Parables, Isaiah 5. By lawsuit and legal speeches, Isaiah 1. By biography, Jonah. By funeral speeches, Isaiah 29. Moreover, the prophets communicated not only by their words, but by symbolic actions. Dramas, one-act plays. Jeremiah hid his underwear in a rock. Isaiah went naked and barefoot for 3 years. These were R-rated communications. Ezekiel cut off his hair and then burned a third of it, struck a third with the sword, and cast a third to the wind. So, how can we say that there is anything particularly characteristic of prophetic literature? How can we employ a method of literary study that attempts to affirm what is typical and not typical? Are there any principles that apply to the literature? And that's what I try to deal with in this book. This is the skinniest book that I have written, and the easiest book to read. My material on Ecclesiastes is very soporific, so it will put you to sleep. But hopefully you will be able to read this. So this is from Abraham Heschel, The Prophets. The painter sees the world in color, the sculptor in form, the musician perceives the world in sounds, and the economist in commodities. The prophet is a man who sees the world with the eyes of God. All right. The Hebrew prophets were not primarily predictors of the future. They were speaking about the future to disclose what is at stake in the present. They give warnings and exhortations to startle people into seeing things differently, to live differently, and to commit to a different future. The Hebrew prophets confront evil and offer hope. And we will try to quickly illustrate this. If you look, the books of the Hebrew prophets address concentric circles. So they start with Israel, and then they move out to the nations, and then they deal with the entire cosmos. So here's an example of dealing with evil in Israel. Verse 23, Isaiah 1:23, your princes are rebels and companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and runs after gifts. They do not bring justice to the fatherless, and the widow's cause does not come to them. Isaiah 1:13, so social injustice. Bring me no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and the calling of convocations. I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assembly. So their religion is worthless. Verse 16, wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. Then they address, they broaden out to address evil in the surrounding nations, and they deal with the Assyrian expansion. They deal with Babylon and Syria, the Arameans. They deal with Egypt and the Sudans. So Cush, the nation of Cush is the area that we call the Sudans. And then they deal with evil in the cosmic dimension. Isaiah 24, verse 3. The earth shall be utterly empty and utterly plundered, for the Lord has spoken his word. The earth lies defiled under its inhabitants, for they have transgressed the laws, violated the statutes, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore a curse devours the earth, and its inhabitants suffer for their guilt. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are scorched, and few men left. They also bring hope, and as they bring that hope, they address this in concentric circles. So there's hope for their own people. And we have in Ezekiel 37 a symbolic vision. He sees a valley of bones, and these bones come together, and then there's tendons and muscles and flesh and skin, and finally there is breath, and they come to life. And this resurrection is actually a metaphor, an image, or a picture of returning from exile, coming back to the land, having their sins forgiven, and getting back into a right relationship with God. Ezekiel 40 to 48, I've published an article on this. This is a picture of the new creation, is what it is, and what it's like to live in the new creation. I could speak for an hour on that topic, but it's not about building a literal temple. It's about building, the temple is God dwelling with his people, as we see in Revelation 21 and 22. If you want to know how the apostles interpret Ezekiel 40 to 48, almost all of the allusions or quotations to Ezekiel 40 to 48 are in Revelation 21 and 22. And what is he talking about there? The new heavens and the new earth. So if you believe in the millennium, that's good, but that's not what Ezekiel 40 to 48 is about. John says it's about the new creation. If you are a Christian, it means that if you want to understand the Old Testament, you have to begin with the teaching of Jesus and the apostles. Hope for the nations. Hope for the nations. So in chapter 2, there's a symbolic image and vision of the mountain of Jerusalem becomes higher than any other mountain in the world, and all the nations are going there to receive Torah. The Hebrew word Torah is best translated by instruction, not law. It's God's instruction in how to live in a covenant relationship with Him. And then they have there's the cosmic dimension. There's the cosmic dimension. We have images of this, for example, in Isaiah 25, where we're on a mountain again, and we're having the best banquet in the world with the richest food and the finest wine. And there will be no death. Because do you know what God eats at that banquet? God eats death. And that doesn't become clear until we see the cross of Jesus Christ. And then in Isaiah 65, we have a new heavens and a new earth. And so they're addressing the people of Israel, they're addressing the nations, and then there's the cosmic dimension as well. The Israelite prophet usually called his experience a vision. Nonetheless, the expression may apply to the experience on any or all of his five senses. His prophetic experience gives him access to the heavenly court where Yahweh is enthroned. In a number of places in the Bible, we are given a glimpse of the court of heaven, where God is surrounded by angels or the heavenly host, who are called in the earlier parts of the Old Testament sons of God, or simply gods. One example occurs in the book of Job. Job 1:6 states that there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and the adversary also came among them. Another example is found in Psalm 82, which begins with the words, God has taken his place in the divine assembly. He gives judgment among the gods. In 1 Kings 22:19, when the king of Judah and the king of Israel are seeking the divine will about whether to join together in an attack upon the Arameans, we see that the prophet Micaiah has access to the assembly of the court of heaven, where God announces his decisions. In verse 19, we read, Micaiah continued, Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven standing around him on his right and on his left. Isaiah, too, as a prophet, has access to the divine assembly. That is the meaning of Isaiah 6 when he hears the Lord say, Whom shall I send and who will go for us? The us is the divine assembly, the court of heaven. The prophet hears and sees the divine decisions that concern the governing of particular individuals, nations, and situations. The prophet does not necessarily understand all that he is reporting, yet with broad strokes the prophet paints a panoramic picture in which the near and distant futures of his vision are set side by side. So the prophets do not distinguish, they paint a panoramic picture, and they do not distinguish the chronology that in their vision. So they put distant future side by side with near future. And I have a long section on that. I want to talk in this talk about typology. The manner in which the prophet speaks of the future is determined by both the purpose of the prophecy in question and the features that constrain communication in the world, in the human world. Broadly speaking, there are three ways in which descriptions of events in the future can be made. Number one, we can use literal, plain speech with no metaphors, no figures of speech, no symbols, no types. Number two, we can use apocalyptic language, which we will be considering in the next lecture. It makes heavy use of metaphors and symbols. And three, types. Each of these three ways of communicating fulfills different functions in the literary setting in which it is found. And the main focus of my present talk is on typology. So what is typology? Events, people, and places in the past that become a model or pattern for events, people, and places in the future. Perhaps it might be helpful to illustrate typology and then afterwards define it more precisely. A major type in the Bible in both the Old and New Testaments is the Exodus, when God delivered his people, Israel, from bondage and slavery in Egypt. Here, an event in the past becomes a model or pattern to describe future deliverance and salvation for the people of God. Let us explore the way in which the prophets in general, and Isaiah in particular, uses the language of God's great act of deliverance in Israel's past to announce and describe the future deliverance from exile. Especially constructive and helpful is an essay by Bernhard W. Anderson entitled Exodus Typology in 2nd Isaiah. Anderson's title is based on his belief that Isaiah 40 to 66 are chapters written after the time of the 8th century prophet known as Isaiah. Here, his presuppositions led him astray, for Exodus typology is found equally in Isaiah 1 to 39. It's all through the book because it's written by one person. Anderson's interpretation better suits an approach that takes the book as a unity written by Isaiah than an approach that does not. Anderson identifies 4 separate stages to the event of the Exodus. Language alluding to each of these 4 stages is employed by Isaiah to describe the future deliverance and rescue of Israel. So the 4 stages, there are 4 stages to the Exodus. There are the promises to the fathers. There is the deliverance from Egypt. There is the journey through the wilderness. And then there is the re-entry into the promised land. So we will briefly describe the basis in the Pentateuch or the Torah for each of these 4 stages, and then illustrate from the book of Isaiah how the prophet employs the imagery and language of that particular stage to describe the future salvation. First, the promises to the fathers. Here the term fathers refers to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the nation's forefathers and patriarch. The Exodus was predicted 400 years prior to the event when God made a covenant with Abraham in Genesis 15. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Avram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in the land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. In Genesis 12, 15, 17, and 22, God promises descendants and land to the fathers. These promises are repeated in Isaiah, but this time with reference to the return of the exiles from Babylon. So an example is Isaiah. I give 2 examples. One is Isaiah 49, 19 to 21, and another one is Isaiah 54, verses 1 to 3. I'll read that one. Sing, O barren one who did not hear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, you who have not been in labor. For the children of the desolate one will be more than the children of her who is married, says the Lord. Enlarge the place of your tent. Let the curtains of your habitations be stretched out. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes, for you will spread abroad to the right and to the left, and your offspring will possess the nations and will people the desolate cities. When the exiles return from Babylon, they will have family members that they don't recognize, and they will have more land. Why? Because the Gentiles, the nations, will be included in the tent of Abraham. So Isaiah employs language from the promises to the ancestors of Israel and applies them to the coming salvation. There is a difference, however. The new Exodus will be bigger and better. It will involve more land and more seed. It's not just some tiny piece of real estate in the ancient Near East. Paul says Abram believed that he would inherit the world. The second stage of the Exodus event is the deliverance from Egypt. I guess I could have put that up. There's the text. The deliverance from Egypt, which involved the plagues upon the gods of Egypt, the exit from Egypt, and the crossing of the Red Sea. Language from this part of the Exodus is also used by Isaiah to describe the coming rescue of Israel from exile in Babylon and the exile in a broken relationship with Yahweh, that is, slavery to sin. This second stage can be illustrated in many ways. A key phrase of the Exodus is that Yahweh delivered his people with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. The arm is applied by Isaiah to the coming salvation especially. So we see this in 40:10, 48:14, 51:5 and 9, 52:12 and 53:1. So when he says in Isaiah 53, "Who has believed the arm of the Lord?" this is a reference to the Exodus. So when Yahweh rolls up his sleeves and flexes his biceps, you won't believe it. But it's a new Exodus that he's going to bring about. It's going to be the death of the suffering servant. So during the Exodus, by means of a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, Yahweh went before his people and was also a rear guard. Exactly these words are used to describe the coming salvation in Isaiah 4, verse 5 and 52:12. In the song at the sea, celebrating the Exodus, in Exodus 15, Yahweh is called a man of war. The only other place where this phrase is applied to Yahweh is Isaiah 42:13 concerning the new Exodus. So you have to pay attention to the text because he's using the language of the Exodus to describe the coming salvation. In fact, Isaiah speaks of a new song in 42:10. What is the new song? Well, in order to know what the new song is, you have to know what the old song is. The old song is Exodus 15, the song at the sea that they sang when they crossed the Red Sea. Yahweh has triumphed, the horse and his rider he has cast into the sea. The new song celebrates the victory of the king in the new Exodus, and this idea goes right through to Revelation chapter 5, verse 9. That's what the new song is about in Revelation chapter 5. It's the song of the new Exodus. The third stage of the Exodus is the journey through the desert, which should have taken just days, but took 40 years. Deuteronomy 1 verse 2 says that you can make this journey in 11 days. In the Exodus, Yahweh led his people and showed them the way, Exodus 13:21. In the coming deliverance, a call is given to prepare the way of the Lord in the desert. Mark identifies John the Baptist and Jesus as beginning to fulfill this part of the new Exodus. So all you have to do is read the Gospel of Mark. Mark 1, verse 1. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ. What is the beginning of the gospel? As it is written in Isaiah the prophet, "Behold, I send my messenger before your face who will prepare your way, the voice of one crying in the desert, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight." That's second Exodus language. See? So the good news about Jesus Christ is Jesus is coming to call the exiles home. During the desert journey, God provided food and water. Bread came from the sky and water from the rock. This imagery is also applied to the future salvation in Isaiah 41, 17-20, 43, 19 to 21, 48, 21, and 49, 10. As a matter of fact, the desert will be eventually transformed into a new Eden. And you see that in Isaiah 35, 49, and 55. The fourth and final stage of the Exodus is the entrance into the promised land described in the book of Joshua. Note Isaiah 49, verses 8 to 11. Thus says the Lord, in a time of favor I have answered you, in a day of salvation I have helped you. I will keep you and give you as a covenant to the people, to establish the land, to apportion the desolate heritages, saying to the prisoners, come out, and to those who are in darkness, appear. They shall feed along the ways, on all bare heights shall be their pleasure. They shall not hunger or thirst, neither scorching wind nor sun shall strike them. For he who has pity on them will guide them, by springs of water will guide them. I will make all my mountains a road, and all my highways shall be raised up. Now if you look here, notice this phrase, to apportion the desolate heritages. The only place where this language comes from is Joshua 15 to 19. I'm sure this is what you do for your devotions. You read this passage every day, where they cast lots. They cast lots to divide the land up to the tribes according to their clans. And this is the new Exodus. Paul does the same thing. Let's see if I can find this quickly. Colossians chapter 1, verse 12, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. Well, this translation, if you read the Greek text, he has qualified you to receive the lot of the inheritance of the saints in light. And the only place in the Old Testament where this can come from is Joshua 15 to 19, dividing the land up by lots. So Paul sees the work of Jesus Christ as bringing about the new Exodus. He's using new Exodus language there. Anderson lists a number of passages in Isaiah where the coming rescue from exile in Babylon and in sin. So there's two parts to the return from exile. First of all, there's the return from Babylon. That takes 70 years. Then there's the return from sin. That takes 77s. Daniel wants the exile to be over in 70 years, and God says, wait a minute. I have to atone for sin. I have to forgive iniquity. I have to deal with sin. I have to bring in everlasting righteousness. This will take 77s. So here are some examples. Here are some examples of the new Exodus language in Isaiah. Chapter 40, the highway in the wilderness. Chapter 41, the transformation of the wilderness. The wilderness becomes a new Eden. Number 42, Yahweh leads his people in a way unknown. Number 43, passing through the waters and the fire. In the first Exodus, they passed through the waters, the Red Sea. In the new Exodus, they're going to go through fire. Verse 43, a way through the wilderness. 48, the exodus from Babylon. 49, the new entry into the promised land. 51, the new victory at the sea. 52, 11 and 12. This is quoted by Paul in Corinthians. Go out, and touch no unclean thing. Come out of Egypt and be part of the new humanity that will survive into the new creation. 55, Israel shall go out in joy and peace. All right. But there is more. There is more that to just using the Exodus as a model or pattern of future salvation. The antitype to which the type points, or the reality of which the model or pattern is only a shadow or prediction, or which it foreshadows, is always bigger and better than the type. We shall briefly consider 3 examples. So here's the first one. So where we're talking about escalation, when the new Exodus occurs, it will be bigger and better than the first Exodus. Depart, depart, go out from there, touch no unclean thing, go out from the midst of her, purify yourselves, you who bear the vessels of the Lord, for you shall not go out in haste, you shall not go out in flight, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be the God of Israel will be your rear guard. Now, here's what you should learn from reading this text. You notice what it says, you shall not go out in haste. If you're reading the Hebrew, it says b'chipazon. The only other place in the Bible where you have this phrase is in the Exodus. Once in Exodus, and I think this phrase occurs 3 times in the Hebrew Bible. If you have a Hebrew Bible, it's okay if you don't have a Hebrew Bible. If you have a Hebrew Bible, the Masoretes put a marginal note there to tell you that this only occurs 3 times. Exodus 20 verse 11 and Deuteronomy 16 verse 3. So if you're reading this, your mind goes right away to the Exodus, you see, because that's the only other place in the Bible where this phrase occurs. And notice what happens here. What happened at the Exodus? Well, they were in a big hurry. They didn't have time to let their bread rise. So they had to eat bread without yeast. They had crackers, pita crackers. And they were snatching up their stuff, and they were snatching stuff from the Egyptians, and they left in a big hurry. In the new Exodus, you will have loads of time to saunter out slowly. And we now know at least 2,000 years. The new Exodus is bigger and better. You don't have to leave in a hurry. And it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Because God takes so much time to deal with each one of us. We're so stubborn, we come so slowly. I just read the book by Nabil Qureshi, Seeking Allah and Finding Jesus, and God dealt with him over a long period of time to bring him to faith and trust in Jesus Christ. So the new Exodus is bigger and better. Here's another example. The claim, what I'm claiming is that the new Exodus is the whole period of time between the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ. Listen to Jeremiah 16. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when it will no longer be said, as the Lord lives, who brought up the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt, but as the Lord lives, who brought up the people of Israel out of the north country. I just have to explain this. If you know your map, if you know the map of the ancient Near East or the Middle East, you know that Babylon is not in the north, it's directly east of Israel, right? But what is between Israel and Babylon? The desert. In the ancient world, they did not fear the C word, they feared the D word. Desert means death. You don't cross the desert or you die. So the only way to get from Babylon to Israel is to go up the Euphrates River to the top and come down from the north. So when it says here, I brought up the people of Israel out of the north, they're coming from Babylon. For I will bring them back to their own land, out of the north country, and out of all the countries where he had driven them. I will bring them back to their own land that I gave to their fathers. Behold, I am sending for many fishers, declares the Lord, and they shall catch them. And afterward I will send for many hunters, and they will hunt them from every rock and every hill, and out of the clefts of the rock. So what I propose to you is Jeremiah explains this in plain speech, and then he explains it in figures of speech. So first of all, in plain speech, you're not going to, there's coming a time when you will not be boasting about the exodus from Egypt. You will be boasting about the exodus from Babylon. And it's not, there are no figures of speech there. I'm bringing my people out of the north country. Do you see that? That is plain speech. It can't be any plainer. Then he has figures of speech. I'm going to send, it'll be like fishermen fishing for fish. It'll be like hunters hunting prey. Okay? And so what happens in Luke chapter 5, when Jesus calls his followers, he says he will make them fishers of men. So you see what he's doing? He's saying, if you know the book of Jeremiah, I'm sending you guys to bring the exiles home. This is, the new Exodus is bigger and better. Another important passage is Isaiah chapter 27. And here we have the picture of a harvest for bringing the exiles home. In that day, from the river Euphrates to the brook of Egypt, the Lord will thresh out the grain, and you will be gleaned one by one, O people of Israel. And in that day a great trumpet will be blown, and those who were lost in the land of Assyria and those who were driven out to the land of Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain. And what I believe is that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, when Paul is talking about the coming of the Lord to gather his people home, he talks about the trumpet of God. And this trumpet comes from Isaiah 27. Paul is thinking of Isaiah 27. So when he says in 1 Thessalonians 4 that there will be the trump of God, and the trumpet will sound, and we will be gathered to be with the Lord in the air, this is God bringing the exiles home. So the exile begins with the coming of Jesus, telling his disciples, I'm sending you guys out to become fishers of men, and it ends when the Lord returns and the trumpet is blown, according to Isaiah 27. Another passage is Isaiah 2:2-4. It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and it will be lifted above the hills, and all the nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways and walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, or the Torah, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and shall decide disputes for many peoples. He shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. In this section, Isaiah sees in a vision a picture of the future Zion. He sees it as a mountain higher than any others. In verse 3, all nations are coming to this mountain to receive Torah, instruction. This image is based on the Exodus, when Israel came to Mount Sinai and God gave the Torah to Israel. Only in Isaiah 2, Zion has replaced Mount Sinai, and all the nations are coming to Zion to receive Torah. So the new Exodus is bigger and better. Isaiah chapter 4, in that day the growth from Yahweh will be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and honor of the survivors of Israel. And he who is left in Zion and survives in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion, and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment and a spirit of burning, then the Lord will create over the whole site of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night. And this is the best translation, so I don't want to take a whole hour to explain this, but take a picture of it. For the glory will be a canopy over all. The glory will be a canopy over all. There will be a booth for shade by day from the heat and for a refuge and a shelter from the storm and rain. So what does this remind you of? Well, it reminds you of the Exodus, right? When they were coming out and there was a pillar of cloud by day over the tabernacle and a pillar of fire by night, right? But what does this text say? It says that the glory, that the cloud was the glory of the Lord. Remember when they built the tabernacle? This bright cloud called the glory of the Lord settled on the tabernacle, and then it went with the people by day and by night. Here it says the glory will be a canopy over all. So the whole city is the temple. That's where John gets it in Revelation chapter 21, because he's reading these texts properly. The whole city of Jerusalem is the temple of the whole new creation is the temple. There won't be a temple because the whole thing will be a temple. That's why the streets are paved with gold, because the only place in Israel where you have gold is in the temple. And here he's saying the whole city is the whole creation is the temple. Here's one. In that day, the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnant that remains of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, from the coastlands of the sea. He will raise a signal for the nations. He will assemble the banished of Israel, gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. The jealousy of Ephraim shall depart. Those who harass Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah, and Judah shall not harass Ephraim. They shall sweep down on the shoulder of the Philistines to the west. Together they shall plunder the people in the east, and they shall put out their hand against Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites shall obey them. The Lord will utterly destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt, and will wave his hand over the river with his scorching breast, and strike it into 7 channels. He will lead people across in sandals. There will be a highway from Assyria for the remnant that remains of his people, as there was from Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So what you see here, when it says he stretches out his hand, you think right away of the Exodus, right? Because he does the Exodus by an outstretched hand and by a mighty arm, right? Then you see the word second. He does it a second time. So he's not talking about the Exodus in the past. He's talking about the Exodus in the future, right? And then you go here, and it says that he will destroy the tongue of the sea of Egypt and wave his hand over the river. I want to ask her a question very bluntly. Is Isaiah describing the event literally? Will the Red Sea be dried up and the Euphrates divided into 7 channels? This did not happen for Ezra and Nehemiah in the physical return from Babylon. No, according to the interpretive principle of using images and the language of God's deliverance in the past to describe a coming salvation, we form in our minds only the idea that there are no obstacles that will stand in the way when he brings the exiles home. This is what the rules of Hebrew literature require at this point. It is not a matter of defending a literal hermeneutic. This is a false debate. Should you have a literal interpretation or spiritualizing the text? It is a matter of discerning the method of communication used by the prophet and using that method to determine their intended meaning. The literal meaning is the meaning as determined by the rules of the genre that you're reading. Are you reading the front page or are you reading the comics? We're looking at the comics here. Now, very quickly, I think I can do this. I want to show where the prophets got their ideas. Why did the prophets use the Exodus as a type of future salvation? Well, it comes from Exodus 15. The poem or song in Exodus 15 is divided into 4 stanzas and arranged for antiphonal singing, a type of singing that probably requires a brief explanation. So many churches, I don't know about churches here, but in England, they're in the shape of a cross. Do you have that in Europe? I think you have that in Europe too. Where you see A and B, this is where the choir sits. And the choir can sing to each other. The A choir can sing one line, and the B choir can sing another line. So this is what they call antiphonal singing. Okay? And we actually have this in Exodus 15. So it's divided into 4 stanzas. There's a praising choir and a narrative choir. So the praising choir says, "Praise the Lord, our God is the biggest God there is. There is no other God like him. He's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful." And then the other side says, this is what he did. You know, he brought us through the Red Sea, and he destroyed Pharaoh and his army. And then the praising choir goes at it again, and then the narrative choir tells the story. Okay? So it's like an antiphonal, it's a setup for antiphonal singing. Now we're going to look at the narrative choir. Here is the narrative choir. "At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, the floods stood in a heap, the deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them." 6 clauses. "You blew with your wind, the sea covered them, they sank like lead in the mighty waters." What we see here is an ABA pattern. In verse 8, we have the breath of Yahweh. What is the subject of those verbs? It's the breath of Yahweh. In verse 9, what is the subject of all those verbs? It's the enemy. Every time it's the enemy. I will do this, I will do this, I will do this. And then in verse 10, you have the breath of Yahweh again. And this is a visual picture of the Israelites going through the Red Sea with a wall of water on each side, you see. They go through, so you have the breath of Yahweh on each side, they're going through the Red Sea. Then the enemies go through and they're destroyed. So the poetry gives you a picture of going through the Red Sea. Do you see that? Now, this will blow your socks off. Are you ready to be lifted right off your chair? In the last stanza, okay, I guess I need to, in the last stanza, I better look this up in the text. Exodus 15, verses 12 and 13. Yahweh leads them into a new Eden. You stretched out your right hand. The earth swallowed them. You have led them in your steadfast love, the people whom you have redeemed. You have guided them by your strength to your holy abode. It will become clear in a moment that this is the new Eden. Then in verses 14 to 16, we have what Norbert Lowe calls the avenue of sphinxes. The nations are paralyzed by fear. They've been turned into stone. The peoples have heard, they tremble. Pangs have seized the inhabitants of Philistia. Now are the chiefs of Edom dismayed. Trembling seizes the leaders of Moab. All the inhabitants of Canaan have melted away. Terror and dread fall upon them because of the greatness of your arm. They are still as a stone. Do you see that? This is the avenue of the sphinxes. Till your people, O Lord, pass by. Till the people pass by whom you have purchased. And then in verse 17, Yahweh leads them into a new Eden. You will bring them in and plant them on your own mountain. Do you see that? The Garden of Eden was on a mountain. I proved that in one of my books. It's in Kingdom Through Covenant. It's the only, water goes downhill, doesn't it? So Eden must have been on a mountain. If you don't believe that, then read Ezekiel, because Ezekiel actually says that Eden was on a mountain. So if you need to see it in print, it's there. But if you can understand the images, you will see that it's also in Genesis 2. The place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, O Lord, which you have established. So Canaan is pictured as a mountain sanctuary. That's the Garden of Eden right there. So once again, we have an ABA pattern, okay? And it's based on the Exodus. It's based on the wall of water on either side and the enemy being demolished in the middle. Do you see that? Only when this song was made, the journey through the desert was still future. When did they sing this song? Right after crossing the Red Sea, right? So do you not see that the Exodus becomes a pattern for future salvation? It becomes a model for future salvation because they hadn't done this yet. So Isaiah and the other prophets of the Old Testament understood that Moses intended from day one for the Exodus to be a model or pattern or prediction of future salvation. He was reading Exodus 15 properly. And now we will conclude because it's time and past time. So here are the principles of typology. We see correspondence between events, people, places at one time and another time. We see escalation. The antitype is bigger and better than the type. We see biblical warrant. That means when you go back to the original text of Exodus 15, you see that Moses intended it to be used this way. And then we see canonical control. So when you're reading the text in the context of the whole canon, the covenants give you a way of recognizing what is a type and what is not a type. So, for example, Adam is a servant king and supposed to be an obedient son, and Noah is called to be a servant king and obedient son, and Abraham is called to be a servant king and an obedient son, and Israel is called to be a servant king and an obedient son, and David is called to be an obedient son and a servant king. So you can use the storyline of Scripture to give a proper control to interpretation of types. All right, thank you.